So James chapter 1, we have talked about who wrote it, to whom, and all that stuff. And we talked about the beginning. And we need to understand the context. Verse 2 tells us to count it all joy when we meet trials. Now this is going to be an important theme. We know that what is going to carry us through trials is the strengthening of our faith, and that strengthening of faith will give us stability. We're going to see the stability thing going on. This is a great book to teach immature young people what stability means. And it's a good reminder for older people like us to remember what we're supposed to model to younger generations, that we're stable. We don't panic because we have that faith that we ask, that when we ask for wisdom, we know we will get it because we have that faith. So, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you will know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Now, oftentimes, we are lacking something, like wisdom. So, if you do lack wisdom, ask God, who will give you wisdom generously without reproach, and it will be given to him, but let him ask in faith. We're back at faith. With no doubting. Now, here is the result of someone that doubts. There's someone who is unstable, right? They're like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For a person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord if he doesn't ask in faith, because he's like a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. In all his ways. So when we lack faith, it is not just a part of our lives that become unstable. We become unstable in everything. Yes?
How do we think through the name it, claim it, faith type? This is their verse.
Yeah.
So how do we not make that error? How do we navigate? What kind of faith and what kind of doubt are we talking about?
Yeah. So you may have heard of the name it, claim it type people. Part of the problem with that is that actually comes from a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. who
said God's dead.
Yeah, who said God was dead. So not a good guy to get your mottos from. But the whole point of name it, claim it really comes from prosperity gospel, where what you're saying is, this is what I want, and so I will claim it for the Lord, and I will have faith that he'll give it to me. But if we look at the context of this, we say this is part of calling out to God when you are in a trial. It's not when you want something for yourself. It's when there's a trial that is consuming your soul. And this church understands what trials look like because of the people we have lost. I got word that one of our members, who is a shut-in up in Spartanburg, she was a Spartanburg regional, and I didn't even know her because she was a shut-in, and you may want to take that one. Hilda Maniason. Okay, that's how you say it. Yeah, I was saying it wrong. Hilda Maniason passed away up at Spartanburg Regional. And so that's a trial. There's when you lose people. Robert is keeping an eye on his mother, who is not doing well. Someone else we need to pray for. She's 95, I believe, but and she's had some close calls, but this they're worried about this one. And you think, well, 95, she's had a long life, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be a trial. And so when those trials come, this isn't about what I want. This is not about how I want to succeed in life. This is about when those trials come and you feel consumed, you need wisdom. You need faith. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, which brings us to verse 9. And I want you to try and remember that this is the Holy Spirit's inspiration to men writing things. This is not a rant. You have to remember that with Paul too, because it sounds like sometimes when Paul's writing, it just sounds like, okay, well, why are we talking about this now? It just seems like it jumped from thing to thing. But when you look closely, you realize there's great purpose behind each thing. And this looks like one of those times when James is jumping to something. Okay, we just talked about, not being double-minded. We don't want to lack anything. That's why our faith needs to grow so we can be stable, not lacking anything. Great. We don't want to be double-minded. And then all of a sudden it says, let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and let the rich in his humiliation. And then explains why the rich should boast in their humiliation or being humble. Why should the rich be humble? Because like a flower of the grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flower falls and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. In other words, in all that work, in all that pursuit, in all that drive, in the end, he's going to disappear just like everybody else. When you look at the accomplishments of Elon Musk, and you see a guy who was able to accomplish something NASA could not accomplish. NASA could not figure out how to shoot a rocket up into space, do whatever it's going to do, and then it comes back and sits down. Straight up. And you've wasted almost nothing, except for a lot of fuel. NASA couldn't figure that out. Elon Musk figured it out. He figured out a way to do the internet better than the people that created the internet. He was able to do all these accomplishments. He bought Twitter and then renamed it and found a way to discount it, and they got in trouble for that. But my point is, here's a guy who has pursued and accomplished. It almost makes us feel guilty because this guy, is he 50 yet? Anyway. So he's done all these things, and what it's saying is he should glory in his humiliation. And what's that humiliation? That none of it actually matters. The only thing that really matters is what's to the Lord, and all this pursuit and all these rockets and all this stuff actually isn't something you boast in, because that's all going to disappear. And so it's almost what he's saying here is, if you're going to boast in the fact that you know that even though you're pursuing these things, that's not what really matters. If Elon Musk was a Christian, what he would say is, I did all this so I can stuff money into the coffers of good churches. That's what matters. He's not going to do that. But it says, let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation. So we're comparing two things, right? So what are we contrasting, if not comparing, contrasting two things? What is verse 9 and verse 10 contrasting? And it's not a trick question. It's not even like super spiritual.
The contrast is a wealthy versus a poor person.
Yes.
that's one of the contracts.
Yeah, that's the main contrast. Okay, we're not Elon Musk. We're not billionaires, maybe one day a trillionaire. We're not that. We're just people living in South Carolina. Yes.
And it's funny, my mind went on the contrast to what really is exaltation and what really is humiliation.
Yeah.
You know, because it's the paradoxes of God and human life.
Yeah.
The things we think are one way, God looks at another, completely opposite.
Yeah.
And we pursue what we think is, hey, I want to have all my bills paid and I can be able to do this and stuff like that, and think that is really where life is.
Yeah.
But rather, kind of takes me to Philippians about to know the power of Christ. But the rest of that verse we don't really associate with the power of Christ, which says, and the fellowship of his suffering.
Yeah.
That's really what we need to be embracing. Not that we go around trying to be martyred, but to realize that the positions in life that God places us, that we feel aren't right or we wish it was better, actually positions us into a greater helplessness, which creates a dependency.
That's right. And that's a great way to look at this. So yes, you have on the surface, you have people that are just normal everyday people, and then people that are these great rich people. And even in that time, it wasn't just that they were rich. To be rich is to accomplish, to be in a position, like you're talking about, to have positions of authority. And that's how we view the world. We view, there's rich people, but we don't, what did they accomplish? And so there's, if they've accomplished something, we put them in high regard. So what is it that the lowly brother is exalted? How is he exalted? This is where, the social justice warriors could really have a heyday with this. Is he exalted because of Marxism and, the lowly person's trying to climb up to be the, have worth and everyone should be equal? That's obviously not it. How is he exalted?
In his faith,
Yes.
Exalted with Christ.
Yes. Calvin put it, our exaltation is through our adoption. The King adopted us. Can you imagine that? Imagine someone who is struggling day to day. Think of this in a context of, the world, and then all of a sudden, someone who has power over everything. You got a kid, across the street in one of those crummy little houses. Maybe there isn't a single wide, and it's fallen apart, and they're barely making it from day to day. And Trump decides, I want you to be my kid. And you have all this money, and this, your dad now has all this power. I mean, it's something that it's an image that we have considered before in this world. We've even created musicals like Annie. This little orphan that's adopted by this rich man, and Mr. What's his name? Warbucks. I almost said Starbucks, but that's a different guy.
close.
Yeah, close. So Mr. Warbucks adopts Annie, and then she becomes, his daughter. And suddenly she's from, being abused in a home that no one cares about her to being cared for by someone who is very powerful. We love that image, right? And we long for that image. And so what is inside of us, even in pagans, look at that image as valuable. But we don't have to look at it as pagans and think of it in terms of money and power. We get to look at it as the King of the universe, who created the universe, has exalted us because we became his children. His children. It would have been an honor just to be a slave. Even Paul refers to himself as a slave. But because of his grace to us, he made us his children. That's how we're exalted. That should exalt the person that thinks they're a nobody. And it should humble the people that have become somebody. That is what we're talking about here. But as we move forward to verse 12, it looks like he's talking about something else again. In verse 12 he said, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive a crown of life which God has promised to those who love him." And then it looks like he's changing the subject again. "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." Why are we talking about that? Right? That's a good question. So let's look in verse 12. What words are repeated in 12 that were in the previous verses? That might help us see why we're suddenly talking about being blessed is the one who is steadfast under trial. Is there a word in verse 12 that's talked about in verse 2?
Wow.
Trials, yeah. So we do seem to be talking about the same thing. So we have these trials. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. Is the word steadfast somewhere in like verse 3 or somewhere? Yeah. So we are talking about the same thing. James is not floating around with this flow of consciousness. He's trying to get at something. So there's a reason why he is talking about trials, how that forces our faith to grow, that gives us steadfastness. And the reason why he's bringing up this idea of let the brother who is in low estate boast in his exaltation, and the rich man needs to be humble because all the things he's pursuing will dissolve. If you don't believe that, just read Ecclesiastes. This is James looking back at Ecclesiastes saying, this is what we're talking about. All your pursuits will vanish. So I hope you use them in a humble way, knowing that these aren't what matter. Men, isn't that hard for us? It's very hard for us to imagine that the pursuits that we had are going to vanish away. I mean, I think about that when I'm away from my family for 4 days in a row, thinking, why am I doing this? Does it help the things I'm trying to build? Yes. But the minute I'm done with all that and I walk away, it's gone. No one's going to care about the Renton Rathman show. No one's going to care about, calling Renton Rathman to go speak somewhere at some conference. There'll be another guy who can speak way better and has something better to say. And they'll be pursuing that guy. And I'll disappear. All that I'm doing won't matter. So I better hope that what I'm doing is pointing at something that matters or supports something that really matters. Because I don't matter. Right? What this is getting at, verses 9 through 11, has to have something to do with trials and something to do with steadfastness, because in verse 12 it said, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial." Whether you are a nobody who learns to be exalted because you are the son of the king or a daughter of the king, or you are rich and you have pursued And part of your trial is realizing that none of that's going to matter. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Now, I want us to see here that crown of life, okay, that is that everlasting life we get. But wait a minute. I thought we were predestined to be his sons and daughters. Why is it saying that there's some kind of steadfastness of, standing this test so that we can receive the crown? Does anyone know what the P stands for in tulip?
Perseverance.
Perseverance of the saints. Oh, that's interesting.
Or preservation.
Yeah, either one. But here's the thing. It's not, I said a prayer, got my ticket. I said a prayer, in VBS, got my ticket to ride. So I am once saved, always saved, theology. I can run off into the world and do whatever I want because I got my ticket. My brother learned that that's not how it works. My brother learned that when you're his, he will bring you back and you will persevere because you have been chosen. But that that persevering doesn't always come without a price. My brother, if he was given health, he would have run. So the Lord took his health away. And it helped him persevere to the end. That's not how God works on everybody, but that's how he worked on my brother. My brother needed to be humbled and his health needed to be taken. Because that's how the Lord was going to bring him back. Because he was his. I warn my kids about that. If you are his and you try to run, the Lord's going to come after his kids. Sometimes it hurts. Beware, because you have a father. And his love can be severe. So how does verse 12 relate to 9 through 11? Verse 12 is talking about remaining steadfast under trial so that we stand, we stand this test so we can receive this crown of life, which God has promised to those that love him. What does that have to do with 9 through 11, do you think? Is that about faith? Is it about temptation? Is it about trials? Is it about wealth? Do you think? Could be about all of those, actually. That's why, when you create a test, especially multiple choice, you can even confuse yourself as the teacher, right? I think in this context, it can be all those things, but it's getting down to that idea of that trial. Because what this is going to be locked into is 13 through 15. How 13 through 15 is going to talk about, I want to make a distinction between what a trial is and what it means for you to fall into temptation. When you fall into temptation, this is not the Lord enticing you to sin. This is you failing the trial. So failing the trial comes in verse 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted of God. In other words, when I am enticed and I start failing my trial, this is not the Lord trying to entice you to sin. That's blasphemy. Your Father does not want his children to be enticed into sin. Now the trials might be brought about by the Lord. But our desire is not to be steadfast. Our desire is to escape the trial. And this is something that men can identify with very easily, but it is something that women should be able to identify as well, because it's not always the lust of sexuality. It could be for men, and it could be for women. But listen to how this is described. There are 6 steps into temptation. But when each person is tempted, each person is tempted when he is lured. So that luring is not the Lord luring you somewhere. When you are lured, what does that look like? You notice your place of escape. For some of us, our place of escape is envy. For some of us, our place of escape might be pornography. For some of us, our place of escape might be discontentment. Whatever it is, we know how to lure ourselves into escape. For some of us, it might be anger. But we're lured because we see over there, if I get angry, that will help me escape out of this situation, because then I feel I'm in control again. If I start being envious and unthankful what God has given me, and I start getting upset and start feeling depressed, that's my escape. And I see it. And I know there is some relief when I get there. That's you luring yourself. This luring becomes enticement, because you start seeing that not only do I see it as an escape, but I know it will feel good. Even that moment of anger will feel good. And I start enticing myself because I start imagining how that will go. This could all happen in fractions of seconds, right?
To me, that's temptation coming from the devil.
The what?
The devil.
Yeah.
Evil. You're being tempted. It's not, God is not tempted.
No.
But He is allowing temptation, or for you to confront temptation.
Yeah. Well, even what we're learning about in Ephesians, that we long for our old self. When we have a new self, it's almost worse for us. And this luring and enticement is by his own desire. Okay? Then desire, when it has conceived, so now desire needs to be conceived. Okay? Conceived means you have created something in your mind that is full-orbed, I can do this. You have made a plan for your escape. It gives birth to sin. That's another step. You've imagined in your mind how this escape will happen, and now I'm going to do it. Now it's turned into sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death. This is how we know how this will work. Where is the end of my escape? It's death. And those are your 6 steps there. And so the contrast that we see between 12 and 3 through 15, 13 through 15 is telling us the steps of where the escape will take us. 12 is saying, be a blessed man who remains steadfast in trial. Does that make sense? That's a great question.
Say it again.
He asked what blessed means. And blessed is the one who receives grace from his Father. I mean, that was the blessing in the Old Testament. The Father gives his blessing to the oldest son. We get to be his sons. And when you are blessed, grace has been given you. And the grace is that you don't have to be tempted. You don't have to go into the temptation that brings you to sin. You don't have to. If you're not his, that's the only path you have. But if you're His, then there is a way to escape temptation. And again, obviously this is talking about the kind of temptation that starts with our own luring ourselves and enticing ourselves.
Is this where Paul in Romans 7 was frustrated because he saw that there was a war
Yeah.
within himself?
That's right.
And you know, the old Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it.
Yeah.
Well, there can be some external influences, but our very self still has sin remaining in it. And that's a fight.
Yes.
That's what we got to do. So I'm just curious, you know, okay, so here's Paul saying that battle, and there's James. Is James saying you don't have to be in that battle?
He's saying that the battle will come, because that's what the trial means, there's a battle. But you can win through the blessing, which is God's grace, that you don't have to sin. You don't have to. Now we still do it because what Paul calls the flesh sometimes wins that battle. But what James is saying is you don't have to lose that battle because God will give you grace. Now, we might be lacking something, so we pray for wisdom. And we pray in faith, otherwise we won't get it. But that's how all of that comes together in this. So it's not James getting all schizophrenic and just jumping from thing to thing. It all has the same thing going on, these trials that lead us to escape. And he's saying you don't have to escape.